here.
Samurai, bound to uphold a code. To live, fight, and die with honor. If you stray from this path, what will you become? A storm is coming.
Jin! Come on, Jin!
Well, it's here, what appears to be the last major first-party PlayStation 4 title, unless, knock on wood, something gets announced between now and, I guess, the PlayStation 5 launch, but this is the last developed specifically for the PlayStation 4 first-party title, and I've been waiting quite some time for this. I know we had some shuffling around of release dates earlier in the year when COVID hit, and just to polish things up, and we're just about a month out from The Last of Us Part 2, which Birdman did a review for. And, when this was all being announced, we said to each other, hey, if we get a chance to review, who wants to review what? And I immediately said, not Last of Us 2, because I'm a scaredy cat. Which, yeah, I'm just not somebody who can play that kind of horror game. And then he told me that game was so emotionally draining anyway. And I went, okay, I want to do the samurai game, because I was a big fan of Infamous Second Son, the last big title that Sucker Punch released. Now, this is... I'll start out the review, because it's going to be a little bit more extended than we usually do for a single-person review, because there's a lot to go over. It's a very large game, deceptively large, bigger than I expected. I will say the few things that I didn't care for initially at the beginning here, because it holds it down from becoming almost like a masterpiece, perfect end-of-life cycle release, with just a few things that were a little annoying that could be patched later on with some bugs that need to be fixed. But for the most part, everything is a very polished presentation. I'll say a couple things I didn't like first. One is a marketing thing. In the trailers leading up to the release and everything they showed, there was a big emphasis on you've got missions. Every mission in the game you can tackle as an honorable samurai or as the ghost, a deceptive ninja without honor. And they always showed you going to the same place like a day or night as a samurai, or that's not in the game, like at all. I felt like they did that to sort of explain some of the mechanics but they didn't. They tried to form a narrative that isn't there. In the game, you do get powers and you do get abilities to behave like a ninja, but you're not explicitly told, like, picking, like, this mission I'm doing this way or this way. You actually go in, like, you can mix and match your styles, and you don't, like, you never approach a town, with the exception of initiating a standoff, like, you're basically calling them out to fight. You don't initiate a mission and go, I'm going to select to do a ninja mission. I'm going to select to do a samurai mission. It's an open world. You can approach anywhere you want at any time, except for a few key areas where you have to wait till the story catches up. And you just walk in and do your thing. Like, you can actually complete things in whatever order you want, except for very key missions. And there is never this, like, there are some missions when you're learning the powers where it's like, you must not get caught. This is a sneaky mission. And you do the sneaky mission, which is fairly easy. It's not like it's going to be so frustrating that, you can't do it. I've only died maybe 4 or 5 times playing on the regular difficulty at a couple of the sneaky parts where I made a mistake because it was me making a bungled mistake. But 99% of the side missions, extra little bits you do here and there, even most of the main missions, can be tackled just by running head on in. There's no selection of playing it one style or the other. You can play a flute that changes the weather a little bit. That can affect how you play. There is a day-night cycle in some areas, but for the most part, the main missions are hard-coded to either day or night, and they'll present to you saying, this is a stealth mission, this is a samurai mission, this is a whatever. You don't really get to choose those. Those are, you're pigeonholed into them. And when it comes to the regular side missions or extra side stories, those you end up just going in whenever you want, and there's no selection. So that was the only piece of marketing that I felt failed me, because as somebody who would have been a consumer walking into it, I would have gone, I was expecting this, and then finding out that's not part of it at all. So there's not like, you don't get to redo missions. So like you can't make a save and then go, I'm going to, do this. And then it's like, oh, I didn't like how that turned out. I guess you could reload and tackle it a different way, but there isn't a dramatic change in how you play. You just sort of go in and do the mission, and you want to be stealthy in certain sections of that town, you can be stealthy in that section of town. You want to just run in and like run and gun, in quotes, run and slash, you go ahead and do that. And as long as you've killed the people that are in your current area, you can then go hide, and nobody will come find you, and then you can do stealth afterwards. So you can mix and match, but there isn't a direct linear choice of either or. And that was one thing they really pushed in the trailers that is not in the game at all. Everything else is pretty much what you've seen in the trailers, only they actually hit a fair amount. Like it looked a little more straightforward in the trailers as being just like a hack and slash. It's not. It's an open world, almost RPG elements in it as well. You unlock powers. If you've played any of their previous titles, like the Infamous games, it's similar to that. But that was, the one thing I really didn't care for was the marketing aspect of that. As far as game mechanics that I didn't care for, there's only a few things. The game is broken up into 3 sections of the map of the island itself, and you start at the bottom and work your way up. The first section is a lot of open spaces, a lot of mountainy things, but there's not a whole ton of variety in how it looks. It looks a little plain, and I was worried at first that, oh man, is the whole game going to be kind of plain and like a lot of samey? Luckily, that isn't the case, but that is a gripe, is that the opening of the game feels slow and sluggish. It takes you about 5 hours of playing it, even in the main game, till you really start to get into the game and it opens up and you can do more. I did the first couple missions, and then scoured the bottom of the map where I was able to go, and went to every place I could possibly go without continuing the main mission, just to power up and see what I could do. So I was able to put about 10-15 hours down there before moving on, and then I was a little overpowered, but not necessarily, because you unlock certain abilities through the main missions that would have held me back anyway. So it's a little bland at the beginning. They take a little too long, in my mind, to really get you hooked on the main story of the game. And they introduce some other characters that become more interesting, at least at the beginning of the game, than the main story is. And they have pretty good character development that way. But it's a bit of a slow burn at the beginning, and then it amps up and it really gets moving. The only other thing that I would say I didn't care for is they heavily advertise the wind basically showing you the direction of where you need to go. Sometimes that doesn't work. You'll swipe up on the touchpad of your controller, and the wind just won't load. Or it does, and you can barely see where it is. So you find yourself constantly, at least for a large portion of the beginning of the game, opening up your map and just seeing, what direction am I supposed to be going in? Because on the map, it'll show you with the wind the direction you have to go. Once you unlock everywhere you go, like every little town or every fox den, or if you discover a monument where you can get customizable color schemes for your swords, or if you find hot springs, which is where you take a bath and you can increase your health. Once you find those things on the map, they're permanently like fast deliverable too. So you can just go, okay, I want to go there. It's in that area, go there. And there's a lot of them on the map. So it pays to really go everywhere you can in the game and discover everything, because it can be a long time to run from one side of the map to the other. Yet I have a solid state drive put in my PlayStation, so playing it digitally, if you're doing fast travel, you load in like 10 seconds or less. So it's a lot faster that way. Like what would take me 5 minutes of running across the map takes 10 seconds if I just go, oop, I want to go over there. And the only other part that I didn't care for is the beginning of the game. There's a lot, I don't know if it's deliberate or not, there is a lot of, the light sources can be a little harsh, and there was a lot of bloom and almost oversaturation of the light. I played around with the settings, HDR on, HDR off, 1080p, 4K. It didn't really matter how it was. It just seemed to wash out a lot of the colors, no matter what settings I had it at, whatever TV I had it plugged into, 2 different TVs. It seemed to do that a lot, but only in the first section of the game. So that might have been deliberate. I don't know why. It's something that can probably be patched because there wasn't a whole lot of color in that first section. It's a grassland with a little bit of hilly areas and a little bit of marshlands. And that was kind of bland. But again, that is as far as everything that I could say that I can complain about with the game. That's it. Everything else, that's the only thing keeping it away from honestly being like a 10 out of 10 for me. Now, going into the game proper, let's sort of break this down. Graphic-wise, we're looking at upper tier, not quite as good as The Last of Us, as far as the character facial models and rendering. Backgrounds, as well as environmental effects like rain and stormy weather, and just the, I would say, particle effects and things happening are top tier, second to none, probably some of the best in the system. Definitely genre and console defining. It doesn't ever slow down. I didn't notice any frame rate issues. It's pretty consistent the whole way through. I did have my preferred system settings were on the PlayStation 4 Pro with the SSD in there to set it to HDMI 1.4 to lock it at 1080p, and then put on super sampling for boost mode, and that will help it smooth out and sort of render out things in the background. It kept it sort of at a locked 60 frames per second 1080p. It'll be very interesting to see how this upgrades and works on the PlayStation 5. I imagine it'll be even more stunning. That might even correct some of the lighting issues I found at the very beginning of the game that, again, don't affect the later parts of the game. It really does look and feel like you're playing like a samurai TV show or movie, like Lone Wolf and Cub sort of thing. Interestingly enough, when you start up the game, you have the option to select your difficulties, anywhere from easy to very hard and so on. Then you have 4 gameplay styles. And the styles are standard English, which is just English voices, nothing else. English with, I think they call it cinematic. It was English and subtitles, which I did turn on so that I could have the volume set differently. Or if I was, I wanted to be able to read it on the screen if I was laying in bed sort of thing too, and with headphones on. And in that, there's accessibility modes where I enabled it so that it added high contrast subtitles and put black bars around it, which actually gave it more of a cinematic look, which is kind of funny. But there are options to make it a lot easier to read if you have trouble seeing sort of thing. There's a mode that I turned on that was sort of, extra on top of this that enables, I guess they call it accessible mode. And it's for things where you'd have to press like buttons really fast and you don't want to jam your controller or mess with your controller. You can press it once and hold, and that's enough to do it. For quick time events, as well as there's a section in the game where you can upgrade your, I guess your MP would be your ability to recover your health or do your special moves. You can upgrade that stuff as you go along by finding these bamboo stations that you have to cut down different stalks of bamboo in an order, and there's a sequence of buttons you press to do it, and you have to memorize it. It's timed, and if you get it wrong, you'll have to start over again in the normal mode. If you play it on the accessible mode, it lets you look at and memorize the combination for as long as you want, and you can take as long as you want to input those codes. So if you're somebody who's like, oh man, I'm really having a hard time memorizing this, you could potentially just write down the symbols on a piece of paper and press them one by one as you do it to unlock it. So if your dexterity or the ability to move your fingers isn't super fast or dexterous, you can actually, or agile, you can get around that by doing this, and I like that they included that. So the other 2 modes are Japanese, which is Japanese voices with English subtitles, and by the way, the voices and the mouths move based on the language. So when you have this set to English, their mouths move to English voices. You said it's Japanese, the mouths move to the Japanese voices, and it looks seamless. It's actually a pretty cool. I don't know if they made their own engine for that or something, but it's something that very few games do. And so that has English subtitles. And then you have Kurosawa mode. So that mode is what I'm doing my second playthrough on right now. Kurosawa mode, for those of you that recognize the name, Akira Kurosawa, probably the most famous and influential director in Japanese cinema. Made Seven Samurai, made so many other films, famous for his black and white 1950s films, I think for the most part, 50s and 60s. So when you set it to that mode, it's Japanese audio. The voices and tones of the voices change to almost sound like they were recorded in the 1950s. So that sort of hollowy sound, as well as all the audio changes to have that sound, and it sort of has crackles in the audio. It changes to black and white, extra high contrast, with a film grain and even damage effect to it. So when you're running around, you'll see like scratches in the film. So it actually gives it a completely different look and feel that makes it like you're playing a black and white 1950s samurai film. So, you can play that as your first playthrough. I've played it now as my second because I felt that the intended playthrough was to do it in, the full color version just so I could really give it a good review. But the replayability from that alone, it's like, well, now you get to play it at maybe a harder difficulty if you choose, in full-on black and white samurai film mode, which is pretty crazy. I wanted to talk about that earlier, but we were not allowed to say much about the game, going into this before the review was released. But that was something I was like, holy crap, that's going to get a lot of people psyched to play that mode. So, yeah, 4 modes, different difficulties on each, as well as accessibility modes. Pretty sweet they included all that right off the bat. It's not like you have to beat the game to unlock the Kurosawa mode. You can play it right from the beginning. Now, audio design wise, I'll break this into two little sections here. One, it's a very minimalistic soundtrack. It builds when it needs to build to certain, like you can have duels and certain boss battles and that. It'll build to the tension to there, but it is much more minimalistic than you'd find in a lot of other games. You hear a lot more ambient sounds. It's little bits in the background here and there, and it's very well suited to the game. Now, also included in my review is I was given access to a copy of the remixed version of the soundtrack, which is being released this week as well. What it is, it's called The Sound of the Storm, Ghost of Tsushima Soundtrack Reimagined. What I got to listen to were 4 tracks that were remixed and remastered to have the original essence of the songs, but they're done in a electronica, like trance techno-y sort of thing, and it was cool. I almost felt like that would be cool if they could include that in the game, like if that was an option to play those songs or more remixed ones like that in the background. If you're somebody who is a fan of the Final Fantasy VII remaster, how they had like all the different versions of each songs, it's like that. There's it sounds dramatically different, but still feels like it would suit the game very, very well. I'll put a link in the show description so you can check out the soundtrack. I was pretty well impressed with it. I wasn't sure if it was going to be my thing, but of the 4 tracks, the one that I ended up liking the most was it the Ghost Burns? Yeah, it was the Ghost Burns Toki Monster remix, which was that the one I liked the most? I believe so. Or because there's a couple out of the 4, one of them was probably the best one. I've been listening to them on repeat over and over again. If you're somebody who is buying the game physical or buying it, pre-ordering it ahead of time, you'll get a copy of the regular soundtrack as a digital download. That was not included in my preview copy that I received a few weeks ago. So I don't know. I can't review that part per se, but that it is neat that they're prepared to release a remixed version of this as well. Now, as far as gameplay goes, it plays a bit like a hack and slash. You can pull out your sword whenever you want and attack. You can move around and dodge and pull out your bow and arrow or your quick attack buttons, which throw different quick shot things like your little knives or your smoke bombs. You earn those slowly as you go through the game, and killing bears as well as wild boar and wolves, collecting their pelts, that will let you upgrade your quick attack things, and as well as collecting all the different flowers in the area can let you change the color of your clothing. And then collecting bamboo and metals, precious metals, eventually will let you upgrade your weapons. You have one katana through the whole game that you slowly upgrade. You can upgrade your I was going to say assassin's dagger is what you get later on that you can upgrade as well to kill people faster and make those kills more silent. And the more silent they are, the more kills you can do in a row. You can kill 2 or 3 people at once, like slash, 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 and just take them all out. If you kill somebody out in the open and somebody walks by it, they will notice it and get alarmed. So you can't drag them around. It's not like Hitman. So if you're smart, you try to kill them in an area where somebody else isn't necessarily going to walk. Or you can just go slash them apart. And as you upgrade your weapons, more and more things can happen. Like if you upgrade your sword to the max level and then equip the right armor, you can strike fear into the enemy. And what that means is when you kill somebody, you'll like chop their head off or an arm, and instead of somebody wanting to fight you, they'll crawl on the ground, terrified, like crab walk away from you, and you can run up to them, press the square button, and execute them in front of other people, which will then make other people afraid and run away. And if you don't get to them quick enough to kill them, they run away and they never come back, and you don't even have to fight them. It just means you can't loot them for any supplies if you wanted to. Collecting supplies helps you purchase extra materials that you might need. It's the equivalent, I guess, of money in the game. You can find people running around. When you're running around on the streets, you'll see the Mongolians have people captured. If you kill them, you free the person. They might give you a hint as to where a Mongolian camp is. And the goal of each map is to free as many settlements and areas as possible and liberate them. Doing that completely for an area will give you a trophy. You don't have to do every single one to complete the game, but once you complete the game, you then have the option to free the rest and get the rest of the trophies if you choose to. I ended up freeing everything beforehand. So some areas you'll go to and it'll say Mongolian territory and you can't free it right away. Like there'll be nobody there. You have to wait till a in-game thing will trigger till you can do that. There are some areas, as I alluded to earlier, that must be done in a specific order. If you get there too early or not through a main mission, you'll get a thing popping up on your screen saying you're entering an area of overwhelming enemy presence, and they'll just start firing arrows at you from the middle of nowhere, and you'll die in like 2 hits. You cannot, it's not a matter of you can try to go in, you can't. The closer you get, the faster you die. Same goes for when you're swimming. If you're trying to go out and let's say you want to go into a Mongolian boat, as you approach the boat, it'll say you're going to drown, even if you're not, and it'll count down. Once it gets to 0, you drown, you end up back on shore. Reloading from death is really quick, which is good. And the most I died was from falling, dropping in areas. The only other part I really want to talk about as far as controls go is a large portion of this game is not just in combat or running around or riding on a horse, which is standard, which I didn't feel I had to talk about much. It's parkour. There's a lot of the game where you're climbing sides of mountains to get through an area quicker or get to a certain area to pick up a flag that was dropped or pick up collectibles or just to find certain areas, especially if you're trying to find shrines where you can go and honor a shrine and you'll end up getting little charms that you use to power yourself up. You can equip so many to your weapons, and that'll do things like 10% extra damage from your sword or give a moderate increase to your health, or recovering while at less than 50% health doubles your health recovery, sort of thing. Think of it as like materia from Final Fantasy. Now, that area, like going to those shrines, they're always a little puzzle. It's just a walking puzzle. It's not hard to get through. You can die a couple times, but there's no penalty to do so if you fall. The Mongolians have burned or destroyed all the direct paths to each of these shrines. So you find the shrine, you have to sort of follow an area, and you'll look within the vicinity. Sometimes a golden bird will come and sort of direct you where you're going to go. You sort of follow it, and you'll be like, oh, so here, I got to jump and parkour here. And you find these little ledges on mountains you can jump onto. And you sort of, I guess a little bit like Uncharted, you point the stick in the direction that you want to move, and your character will sort of jump towards that. And eventually you get a grappling hook that lets you go to all of them. And when you jump, you have to grappling hook sort of like... I guess pretty much like it feels like Spider-Man a little bit. Like you jump, press it, swing, jump, swing, and that in combination with pressing trigger buttons to go underneath crevices or between cracks of walls, parkouring over mountains. You'll find your way to the peak, the summit, and where you'll get your enhancement, your charm, and usually a fairly rare collectible that can be used to upgrade your bow is usually up there. It's a type of wood. It's waxwood, and you only get so many of those in the game. Mostly from these areas, you can find one sort of at the top of each summit. And when you're done, you don't have to climb all the way back down. You walk down the stairs a little bit, and a little thing will pop up on your screen saying, "Press this button to, go down from the summit." And that way, you don't have to ever, climb all the way down again, because it can take 5 minutes or so to climb up in the first place. So they really wanted to push, I guess, that aspect, and it is very fluid as you're playing. It's pretty cool, and the rocks and the trees and everything, really high fidelity, good quality. You can always tell if a rock is climbable because it'll either jut out a little bit or it'll have like a little bit of a red tinge to the coloring. So that's always good to know. And then whenever you find a spot where you can either climb up with the grappling hook or climb down or swing from, it'll be a tree branch that has a bit of white cloth wrapped around it and a rope. But by rope, I don't mean it's dangling. It's like a rope with a little bit of red on it. Anything with red on it is interactable, and it's not like it jumps out at you or anything. It's just sort of there. So that's control-wise. It's pretty straightforward. When you're going into a town, once you unlock the ability, you can challenge people to a standoff. And what you do is you just sort of wait for them to make their first move, and then quickly, press the square button to slash at them. And doing so will immediately kill them. And the advantage there is when you call them out, they send out some of the most powerful people in the camp. Usually not the general. Usually you have to kill the general separately, which will send people running in fear or let you free the camp. But you'll get to kill some of the more tough brutes that way. And eventually you can get armor leveled up enough and abilities that you can kill 5 people doing a standoff, one after another, slash, 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 if you time it right. And in doing so, raise the fear level so high that if there's like 6 or 7 people there, they'll just run away. And I've actually, smaller camps I've freed just from a standoff. It really rewards you. As far as a ninja power, the closest thing that comes to that is sneaking up behind them in tall grass. If there's 4 or 5 of them there, you can eventually upgrade your throwing knives to a level where you have 5 sets of them, and each set can be fired upon 3 or 4 people at once. And you can just run in and go blah, 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 fire 5 of them. And you can actually pick up some if they didn't actually land and replenish your amount in your quick fire inventory. But you could kill them like that way quickly too. The only thing you have to watch out for if you do it like that is sometimes they are they've got a prisoner with them. Depending on the mission, if you accidentally fire those quick shots at them, it might kill the person you're there to protect. So in those instances, it might be better just to either walk in and attack regularly or do a standoff with them. As far as how the game is broken up, it is you do a prologue, you then have to recover. You have no armor, you have to recover and slowly learn your abilities while following people. You end up meeting friends that will help you retake the island, and you have to do a set amount of certain missions for them before you continue onward. And I chose, I'm assuming you could do the rest of the game without doing all of those, because they are highlighted on the map as sort of in a silver color as an optional. Gold colored missions are ones you have to do to progress the story. It looks like you only have to do the ones that introduce each of these characters, and I won't go into them because they're some of the best parts of the game. They are by far the most emotionally rewarding people in the game, have the best stories and backstories, can be very philosophical where it's even questioning their own identities or your place in it. The game itself, with a lot of these side characters, it's dark. Like, it's not the same level as Last of Us Part 2, but when you're playing it, these are very heavy characters. I will go into details with one where one character, one of the first people you meet up with that's going to help you, is someone who lost her entire family due to basically like a burglary, or what appears to be a burglary. And every part of her mission, which is 9 parts that you get to do with her over the course of the game as extras, it just builds up the ante of, like, she's in this just for bloodshed. She's like, I'm going to find who did this to my family, and I'm going to murder them in the most horrific way I possibly can. And she just gets angrier and angrier and angrier. And it's a grandma. It's just getting angrier and angrier and angrier. Every character has some part of their past that they are not okay with, or there's a dark part of them that they are a little ashamed of, and they have to do sort of a redemption. Every single character in the game, save for one, and all of them, including the one that is completely good, has tragic parts to their story. And I wasn't sure if it was going to be something that endeared me to them or not. And I found that by the end of the game, I was like, wow, the side characters are almost better written than the main story of the game until you get to the last part of the game. Then the main story really picks up and you get the emotional weight of it, and you get some flashbacks to your past to explain certain things. So they did a really good job. Make sure that when you're playing, you do all of the side missions for all the characters that you can. I might have missed one because I didn't hit the trophy for getting all of them. So I might do that on my second playthrough and see if I can get that. As far as anything else is concerned, each of those missions, I said, with the side stories, with the characters, they play out like you're playing out a TV series where you're with your guest characters that you're getting throughout your missions. Same goes for little extra missions that happen. Some of them don't involve your extra characters. They just involve legends or tales that you complete on epics that will help you get special moves or special armors or extra things in the game. And there'll be a chain that flows through. And when you look at it, it'll actually say, like, this is part 2 of 6 or something to that extent. There is a part in the second part of the game where, you've liberated the bottom part of the map. You go to the middle part. That's where I said it really opens up and you get a big variety, cherry blossoms and swamplands and mountainous areas and almost desert-like spots. It really shows a wide variety of color and terrain. And in that area, you can do a side mission. I don't think is required. I wonder if I hadn't done them, had the later part of the game been harder, maybe because you unlock things from beating these characters. Basically, a hit is put out on you, and 5 of the deadliest swordsmen want to fight you, and you can see them on your map sort of pop up where they're going to be, and there's always a circle, like a samurai fighting pit circle, and they're all in different spots. One's like on a waterfall, one is in a field of grass, one is in the mountains, one's with the cherry blossoms, and when you show up to challenge them, they won't fight you immediately. You have to talk to them, and they'll say, all right, you're here, prepare to die, that sort of thing, and then the screen will fade for a second, come in and say, duel at the so-and-so, and it looks just like something out of a manga or something out of like a Japanese samurai movie, and you have your battle, and as you're fighting them in a duel, they're talking to you. Once you kill them, it says concluded, and then you can move on to the next one. You can do them in any order you want, and once you've beaten all of them, it unlocks another duel with their master, and you have to sort of secretly find that one, and you go to see that master, and while it is technically an optional mission, in canon, you really have to do it because you show up and there's just like piles of bodies around. It's like anybody that showed up that wasn't you, he's killing, just waiting for you to show up. So you're like, holy crap. So there's that. There's a third section of the game that is the uppermost portion of the map, and that is sort of the wintry wastelands, and that's where I feel a lot of these games will lose a little bit of steam, and this didn't. It sort of opens up and you can climb a mountain, and it introduces an element of the game that wasn't in anything previously, which is if the higher up in the mountain you go, it gets very cold, and you have to find shelter and fire on your ascension of the mountain. The reward for going up the mountain is you can get an ability, which is pretty cool, and it becomes a very vital ability in your arsenal. And it feels, again, sort of like Final Fantasy VII when you were climbing the mountain and you had to stay warm. But in that one, you had to keep pressing a button to stay warm. This is, you have so many seconds, like 20 seconds or 30 seconds between campfires to get warm. And if you're not, you'll eventually see things get hazier and hazier, and you can't really see more than a foot in front of you, and your health goes down, you'll die. Now, you don't have to start at the beginning of the mountain again. It starts you at the last checkpoint, which was the last fire. So eventually you'll make your way up. Just, be careful of anything attacking you on the way up too. Now, I won't go into any more of the story itself, except that the villain was really well done, but I felt could have used a bit more of him in it. He's mostly there in cutscenes, and you have your big battle at the end. I felt that they could have spent a little more time introducing him or having a little more with him, but I did like what they did. They did leave themselves open for a sequel, but there's only one choice in the game. Like, there's things you can say to people when you're riding with them on missions. It doesn't seem to affect too much. Like, it doesn't affect like whether they stay with you as friends or not. It's just sort of, they'll give you different reactions. Like, you can agree with them, or you can placate to them, or you can say something contradictory, and they might give you a different result. There is a big choice of the game, and it's not at the main part of the game. You beat the game initially, or what you think is the end of the game, and then you have sort of another part of this that's the true end of the game that happens, and you have a choice that you make there. And the choice you make is pretty dramatic, and is very vital to the story and the core being of the character of the game. And I did it two ways. I made sure I saved before and made the choice one way or the other, and it does change how people react to you afterwards. Once you make your choice there, regardless of what you make, the credits will play, and then the game will open up, as a lot of these open world games do, and let you save, and you open up and you can talk to somebody that's there, and then go out and finish the rest of the missions that you might have missed in the game, short of ones that were story-based or relied on your characters being there before the end of the game. Speaking of having your characters finish all those missions, they will show up with you in climactic battles, and their AI is pretty decent that they'll pull away some of the harder characters that you would have to deal with away from you. Or if you're trying to take a siege weapon, some of them might come with you, and I know if you didn't complete their missions, they would not have come with you. So that's kind of cool. But it feels like what I see at the end of the game after you beat it, and after you beat it, where you are, you can read these little collectibles and things that you've had along the way, and it sort of gives you a little backstory into what's happened. It feels like, hey, there could be more DLC coming, even though they haven't announced like a season's pass or anything. Or it leads into, hey, we could do an expansion, maybe something like the Miles Morales game, where it's, it continues on a little bit as a miniature game from the Spider-Man game. They might do something like this with this, or it could lead into a full sequel where it's no longer on Tsushima and it's off the island, because there's a lot of hinted things throughout the game saying people wanted to get off the island to go to the mainland, or trying to stop an invasion of the mainland, or at the end of the game, once you beat it, they're like, hey, we got to drive the rest of these people off the island. Well, I already did that, so I had completed everything as far as I could tell. I'm only going to find the wandering few random generated enemies that show up on the map still, unless something else populates or I miss something very vital. But when you discover, or when you take back each of the territories off of parts of the map, once you've collected all of them and taken them all back, it reveals the whole map, and it will show question marks on anything you missed. Well, all the question marks are gone for mine for the entire game. So the way it ends, it leads me to believe that, hey, there's probably more coming, but who knows? I would be very happy if they did, because it's one of the best experiences I've played on the system, and it was a lot better than I was expecting. I know at the beginning of the review I was griping about a few things. I feel the marketing was a little off initially. That didn't serve it as well, because I think people are going into this thinking you play as one or the other, or choose one or the other, and it's not. It's a classic open world game done right, where you can do whatever you want. It is a large game. Both inland, it doesn't really get boring as far as traveling the land, except in the very first section of the game, which is unfortunate, because you think you'd want that to hook you. But if you are finding yourself like, hey, looks kind of boring as far as the scenery, it opens up much more as you get into it. The first section of the game is sort of to give you a feel for it. The meat and potatoes is in the second section of the game, and you will backtrack a couple times. Now, the third section of the game is more of a winter wonderland sort of thing, so there's less up there to deal with. The meat and potatoes is the center section, where you have the big variety. As far as how long is this game, there is no in-game counter for how many hours you played. There is no save file counter. It is an autosave game, but you can save manual files as you want to as well, which is what I made sure I did before key choices. I'm doing a guesstimate on how long I played, but it's anywhere in the realm of, I think, 50 to 75 hours. It did not feel as long as like a Persona at like 100 hours, or like a Xenoblade. It did not feel that long. It was definitely a longer play than Final Fantasy VII, so that's why I'm like, okay, I played so many days in a row, 6-7 hours a day I was playing. I think I put in about 55 to 65 hours, and that was for a pretty casual playthrough, not on the easiest setting, but that's with an almost 100% complete. The only thing I'm missing are some of the collectible banners, which unlock. Collecting all of them will give you a trophy, as well as unlocking saddles for your horse, which, as far as I can tell, are only cosmetic. They don't seem to change anything else. I'm missing some of the crickets. When you collect them from grave sites, you can then get more songs you can play on your flute, and that will give you that will change the weather where you are if you wanted to get an advantage on something. Then what else was I missing? I think I had gotten all of the honoring the shrines. I had gotten all of the color variations for my swords. I had also gone to all of the hot springs for the baths. I had gone to all the fox dens, and that would have been it, except for collecting more like fur pelts and things to upgrade to maximize the last couple bit of my throwing weapons, as well as I had maximized the upgrades on all of my armor, which, by the way, upgrading your armor changes the look of the armor, and you can mix and match the hats and stuff, and that doesn't affect you. It's just the main armor itself. But upgrading it will dramatically change your stats. Like, there's one set of armor that removes fog of war when you're exploring for the first time, as well as helps your controller rumble as you get closer to rare artifacts. Oh, that's the thing. I was missing some records of the Mongolian stuff, where if you collect the records, you can read them. Some of them tell you story bits, as well as just history information. Some armor lets you be more melee attacks. Some of them is more defending. Some of them is for being stealthy in grass. One of them, the ghost armor you see in the game, that's the one that makes people terrified of you and run away when you kill them. Makes like sloppy, messy kills where you can chop off heads and stuff. You don't get to target it. It just sort of happens. So I had most things except for maybe 3 or 4 different types of collectibles. If I spent another 5 hours or so running through the game, I would probably have absolutely everything in that playthrough. And I'll probably end up getting it when I do my Kurosawa playthrough completely later on here. Now, as far as, should you pick up this game before the PlayStation 5? That's an absolute yes. It's one of the top 5 games I've probably played on the platform. Going into it, I was worried it wasn't going to be. That's because I felt it had a slow start. That's the only thing keeping it from getting like a perfect score from me. It's like we don't really give number scores here on This Week in Geek, but it's a 9.5 or so out of 10 for me. 10 out of 10 if the things I mentioned earlier wouldn't bother you. Like, it's that well made. It's got the right amount of emotion in it. It's not going to be leaving you as drained as people were playing The Last of Us Part 2. You're going to, somebody who only plays a couple hours a day, you're going to have this game to play for the rest of summer. And I'm probably going to play a bit of my playthrough on the Kurosawa remote, and I might wait till the PlayStation 5 comes out when I can put my money down on that and see how well it looks on there too. That being said, you shouldn't wait for this. This is probably the last big game coming out for the PlayStation 4 that is first party. It is a game that can hold you over for sure over the summer. And you don't have to be super Twitch skilled with your reflexes with this. This is a game that you can enjoy and just immerse yourself in 300 years ago, 400 or 500 years ago samurai culture. The idea is, it seems, they don't really explicitly say it, I'm not super versed on Japanese history. It feels like this is the first time that like ninjas are a thing. Like it seems to be like that's a rarity, because the Mongolians don't even know how to deal with somebody fighting like that. They've trained to fight samurai. They don't know how to deal with somebody who fights like a ninja. Very well done. Voice acting is pretty much top notch. Facial animations aren't perfect, but are better in cutscenes. And just one of the best titles on the PlayStation.
Well, that's our show.
All right, here's the deal. Every time you watch my show, I will send you $40.
Checks will not be honored.
You've been listening to This Week in Geek, your source for guaranteed nonsense or your money back. Tune in next week for more info on the most important things you didn't need to know. Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net and subscribe to our podcast through iTunes or any podcatcher. If you'd like to comment on this episode, head over to this episode's post at thisweekingeek.net and leave a comment through Facebook Connect. Follow us on Twitter at thisweekingeek.net and follow our Instagram at twig_official_podcast. Social media not your thing? Send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. We'll see you next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
Just when you think this show is terrible, something wonderful happens.
What?
It ends.
I have to go. Somewhere there is a crime happening.